Alright, today I'm going to review graphing a quadratic inequality. So all we have is one quadratic here. We have y is greater than or equal to x squared plus 4x plus 3. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to graph it and shade it on this graph. First thing we're going to do is I'm going to use a graphing calculator to help me graphing, so we don't need to go through the old stuff of graphing by hand and all that. We've already tested over that. So I'm going to show you how to do this in a calculator. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that and we're going to plug in our calculator y equals x squared plus 4x plus 3. So if you go to your calculator, you can go to y equals, type in the entire equation. So I'm ready to graph this. So I hit the graph button, and that's the graph I get. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to transfer it over to my paper. Now I don't like just trying to eyeball it and guessing where all the points are. I'd like to get a little bit more specific than that. So what we can do is we can use a table of values to calculate some of the exact points. Your graphing calculator not only will graph it, but it'll give you a table of values for you. So if you look above the graph button in blue, it says table. So I'm going to do second and pull up my table. So what it's going to do is going to give me a whole bunch of x values and the y values that go with it. I'm going to use this to transfer a whole bunch of my points from my graph to my paper. So for example, I'm looking at this point -2, -1. So my paper, I got to go over -2, -1. I'm going to put a dot. Another point would be -1, 0. So -1 and then 0 would be right there. Another point, 0, 3. So x is 0, y is 3. 1, 8. And then I need to get a few points on the left side. So I'm starting to see this shape here, but remember this is a quadratic, so we want a parabola, a U shape. So if I go the opposite direction, -3, 0. So x is 1, 2, -3. 0 for y, -4, +3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, -5, 8 would be right there. So you can kind of eyeball it and see the shape of the quadratic there. The next important piece is this is a quadratic inequality. So you might have to remember back to Algebra 1, the different inequalities we had were those four right there. And when we graph these, there's different characteristics when we did them. When we had less than or greater than, that gave us the dashed lines on our graph. When we did less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, that's when we had the solid line. So whenever you have the also equal to, you're going to have a solid line. Whenever you have your inequalities without the line underneath it, which means equal to, you're going to have the dashed line. So looking at our graph, we have y is greater than or equal to. So that means our graph needs to be a solid line. So when I draw the line through the points, I'm going to use a solid line. If I had one of these two, so the less than or greater than, I would make a dashed line for my graph. Since I have this, I'm going to use a solid line. All right. One last step to go. With each quadratic inequality, you're going to have shading. Now the shading will either be inside your parabola or it's going to be on the outside. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to test a point. So I could pick any point in my graph. Ideally, I want to pick a point either inside the parabola or outside. And we're going to plug it in and test it. And I'll explain what all that means in a second. The easiest point to use is the origin right there at 0, 0. Because plugging in 0 works nice and easy when we plug it in. So I'm going to test the point x equals 0, y equals 0. So I'm going to plug that into my original inequality. So I have 0 greater than or equal to 0 squared is 4 times 0 plus 3. Simplifying that, 0 squared is 0, 4 times 0 is 0, and plus 3. Combine like terms over here, I get that statement right there. Now this says 0 is greater than or equal to 3. 0 is not greater than or equal to 3. This is a false statement. Because it's false, I'm going to shade on the opposite side. So if I would have gotten a true statement, I would have shaded on the same side as the point I just tested. So I just tested 0, 0. So if it was true, I would be shading on the outside here. But because it is false, I'm going to go the other side. So I'm going to go in the inside. So I'm going to lightly shade all of the area on the inside. Again, a quick review on that. If you plug in a point, so you test a point on the outside, if it's true, your statement ends up being true, you shade on the same side as that point. If it's false, you shade on the opposite side. Now what I'm meaning by sides is inside or outside of the quadratic. So that was graphing one quadratic inequality.